Hi there. I just wanted to do a quick short video demonstrating this game Skyline and essentially just showing how to play the game. This is a game that was just released, designed by David Short and published by Tasty Minstrel Games. And in this game, it's a dice game. You're rolling dice, and you're using those dice to build buildings, and then ultimately have several buildings that look like a neat little city skyline. So to set up the game, you have this central board here, which number one has a lot of really good reference information. Actually does a great job of giving you essentially all the information you need on your turn. It also has this turn tracker up here. There's 9 rounds. You start with this cube on round 1, and you're just going to progress through the 9 rounds. You also have this abandoned district over here. So at the beginning of the game, you're going to set up by taking one of the 3 different types of dice, and I'll explain those in a second, and sticking it over here, and the rest of the dice just go in a big pool over here. So let me real quick just explain the buildings and sort of how that works. Before I explain the dice, you have 3 different types of buildings. You have these low-rise purple buildings, the mid-rise buildings, which are blue, and the high-rise buildings, which are orange. And the low-rise buildings, you can see, can be either 1 or 2 dice high. This kind of demonstrates the various configurations for completed buildings. So for example, I couldn't have a blue building with 3 or 4 or 5 of these midsections and then a penthouse. You have to stay within these configurations. So obviously the different types of dice allow you to go up to different heights. The reason the higher buildings are good, and you want to go, basically you're trying to build them as high as possible, is because when you score, the score of a building, let me just put together a building here real quick, is its height squared. So if I have a building that's 4 high, which is this one right here, this mid-rise, and I've completed it, then 4 times 4 is 16. This building is worth 16 points to me. Whereas if I just have a little ground floor, or low-rise building, that's 2 high, so that's 2 times 2, that's 4 points for me. So obviously the higher you can get them, they become increasingly more valuable. The 6th height, which is the highest you can go, is 36 points, which is great. So that's kind of the different types of buildings. Again, you're always going to start with the ground floor. You have to build from the ground up, so you can't start adding penthouses and then go back and add a ground floor under it later. You're going to start with the ground floor. You're potentially going to add these upper floor dice to it to make the building higher and higher. And eventually, in the case of the blue and orange ones, you're going to cap them off with a penthouse to finish them. The dice themselves, there's 3 different types of dice. There's the ground floor dice, which are these bottom ones. There's upper floor dice, which are the ones that essentially make your building taller. And there's the penthouse dice, which are how you complete your building. Those go on the top. Within each of those types of dice, all the dice are identical. So they all have 3 purple sides, 2 blue sides, and 1 orange side. The exception to that is the penthouse dice, you'll notice, have the 2 blue sides and an orange side, but 3 blank sides. The reason for that is because the purple buildings, the low-rise buildings, don't technically have a penthouse. They can get this second story here, which kind of looks like a penthouse. It's a top, but that's actually on the middle upper floor die. Also, just note that with the low-rise buildings, even one by itself, the ground floor, is technically considered a completed building. The reason that's important is because uncompleted buildings that you've not finished, so if I had a blue ground floor and, say, 2 of these, but I never got around to finishing it with a penthouse, unfinished buildings don't score any points at the end. So you want to complete your buildings. That one's technically considered complete. So that gives you a little bit of an overview of the buildings, a little overview of the dice themselves. There's 3 different types of dice and the different sides available. And again, over here with the abandoned district, you're just going to put 1 of each of those 3 sides, or one of each type in there: ground floor, upper floor, and penthouse, to start the game. Also, to start the game, you're going to take 3 ground floor dice. You're going to set them to their orange, blue, and purple side. Whoever you determine to be the starting player gets the orange dice. And the next player gets the blue, and the 3rd player gets the purple. If there's a 4th player, they don't get to start with anything. And this is immediately started. This isn't to roll. This is already built in your Skyline. if you have fewer than 3 players, or fewer than 4 players, so if you just have 2, you'd still take the 3. You get the orange for the first player, blue for the second player, and there's no third player, so they just get nothing. And I don't remember offhand what the solitaire rules are, if you get to start with 1 or not. I don't think so. As far as why certain players get starting dice and why the starting player, or closer you are to the starting player, you get a better starting dice, I'll explain that when I explain, there's actually an alternate way to end the game. So when I explain that, I'll explain why that's the case. So now that you have hopefully a decent overview of the game, let's go ahead and explain how each individual turn works and the different actions you can take. Okay, so on your turn, you're essentially going to be selecting which dice you're going to roll, and then you're going to be either starting buildings in your Skyline or adding to existing buildings in your Skyline. Your Skyline continues throughout the game, so it's not just a per turn thing. You're going to start some buildings, then your next turn you're going to build on them a little bit, and so on and so forth. And so, at the beginning of the game, since you obviously don't have anything, you want to get some ground floor started, since we need to start there. So, you need to select which dice you want. You have 2 choices. You can select from the abandoned district, or you can select over here from the construction yard. Now when you select the abandoned district, you take any and all dice that are over here. So right now there's these 3 that we started with, and usually that's going to be the case. The reason you would want to select the abandoned district is this could potentially build up to more than 3 dice. You can get 4 or 5 or even more than that. I think about 5 is the highest I've seen it. So if there's more than 3 dice here, it's probably to your advantage to take the abandoned district. Otherwise, if it's just those 3, you can select any 3 over here, so this really doesn't offer anything for you. So, usually, depending on what I'm looking for that turn, I'm going to come over here to the construction yard and select exactly which 3 dice are going to help me the most. At the beginning of the game, I have nothing in my Skyline, so I'm going to select 3 ground floor dice, just to get some building started. You select your 3 dice and you roll them. Now you have your 3 dice, you've rolled them, these are now your active dice, and you need to take an action with at least one of these dice. There's 3 actions available. You can build, you can abandon, or you can demolish. So most of your turns you're going to be building. Building is just you're taking the dice and you're adding it to your Skyline. In this case, it's a ground floor. I can start a new building there, so I'm going to build that one. You have to do that with at least one of them. So if I wanted to, I could build all 3 of these and be done. Let's say I don't want purple buildings. I want to try to go for more blue or orange buildings. After I've taken my action, I can then re-roll. I could say, oh, there we go. I got my orange and my blue. I'm going to go ahead and build both of those. It's my action for my second turn. And I'm done. There we go. That was a great first turn. I got some building started. Once you're done rolling, play passes around, comes back to my turn. I say, okay, well now I want to, I got some good ground floor started, but I want to start some of these upper floors. I want to make these 3 buildings a little bit taller. So I pick these 3 and I roll them. I say, oh, these purple ones, I can't do anything with those because I don't have any purple ground floors. But I do have a blue one, so I'm going to take this blue one and I'm going to use that to build. And that's going to be my action. And then I'm going to re-roll these. And I got that orange. Really excited about that orange. I'm going to add that to my Skyline. I could add the blue right now, but let's say I really want to go for another orange. I'm going to roll this again, and let's say I got a purple. And now I say, oh, there's nothing I can do with that one. As long as I can build it, it might not be exactly what I was going for, but usually you're going to want to. I guess if you get a penthouse and you can build it, but you really want to let that building get bigger, you might not want to add it. But usually, anytime there's a die that you cannot add to your Skyline for some reason, that's when the other 2 actions come into play. One of the things you can do is I can just abandon it. I just ditch it over here in the abandoned district, and that's it. And my turn's over, or I guess that action's over. If that's my last die, my turn's over. Play passes to the next player. The disadvantage to that is now you're giving the next player, or some subsequent player, the option of taking 4 dice instead of 3. So that helps them a little bit. The other thing you can do is instead of helping an opponent, is you can use this dice to demolish. Basically what you do is you're going to throw this dice back over here in the construction yard, but along with it you're going to demolish one of your existing buildings. It can either be a building that you're working on, or it could even be a building that's completed. You know, let's say I had a blue one here that I'd already finished. I can take this and I can demolish that little blue one. Usually you're going to demolish whatever's worth the least amount of points. So it's actually not a bad idea to have, a couple purple ones over here, so you can just use those as fodder to demolish stuff whenever you want. So you're either going to add a building to your Skyline to build it, you're going to abandon it, or you're going to use a die to demolish it. Once you've taken one of those actions, if you have any dice left over, you can re-roll them. You don't necessarily have to re-roll all of them. You know, if I'm trying to build up this orange building, and I'm rolling 2 upper floors in a penthouse, maybe I roll, and I get the penthouse I wanted, but I didn't get the upper floors yet. Well, I could build that in there, but I don't want to yet. So I'm going to go ahead and build this blue one on there. And I don't want to re-roll this orange one because I don't know if I'll get it again. So I'm going to save that one. I'm not using it for an action. I'm just not re-rolling it. I'm going to re-roll this one. I still didn't get what I wanted. Now I'm going to go ahead and add that in there, and I'm going to add this to my second floor. So it didn't work out the way I wanted, but at least I gave myself another chance. So again, you don't have to re-roll everything. You keep going around until you get through 9 rounds. At the end of 9 rounds, the game ends. The other end game condition, actually, before I explain that, one other thing I wanted to touch on is if you ever do, let's say somebody's abandoned some dice and there's some stuff over here in the abandoned district. If you ever do at the beginning of your turn decide to take the abandoned district dice and roll those, which if there's 5, you probably very likely would, just immediately go ahead and refill it with 3 dice, 1 of each kind. 1 of each is kind of the default over here, so anytime it's cleared out, just refill it again. That way, as more people continue to abandon, it'll build up again and become appealing. So, that's the abandoned district. The other endgame trigger is if any player ever completes a level 6 high-rise. So, and I'm a champion. So, I've completed my level 6 high-rise due to my expert rolling, and that triggers the end of the game. So as soon as this happens, immediately we go into the final round. Or we don't go into the final round, that is the final round. So if I'm the very last player, the round immediately is over. Well, if I have any dice left, I can roll them. But once I've completed my last building, you complete that round, and then it's over. You'll remember at the beginning of the game, the starting player and everyone closer to the starting player got to start off with a slightly better ground floor. The reason for that is in the very last round, if it ends early, the first player has less information. It could end because someone triggered, you might be in round 6, someone completes a level 6 building, and that's it. If I knew it was going to be, if we're in round 9 and I know it's going to be the final round, I might abandon some of my plans to just really try to cap off as many buildings as I can, even if they're not as high as I wanted them to be. So because the starting player could potentially end the game with a little bit less information and less of a chance to really finalize some of those points, they start off with a slight advantage. So that's the reason for those extra starting dice. Okay, so you've either completed the 9th round or somebody got a level 6. You finish that round out, and then you go into final scoring. And essentially all you do is throw away or return to the construction yard any unfinished buildings. So let's just, if this is my what do we got here? I built a level 4 and a level 3 and my level 6. Let's say let's say I had another blue one here that I was working on and another orange one that I had started. The other thing I forgot to mention before is anytime you complete a building, you can replace it with one of these cards up here. I just have one of each out here. There's a lot more that come with the game. But this level 4 building, again 4x4, is 16. So I can return that over there to make those dice available so we don't run out. And I could just place a level 16 building in here. It shows the points that it's worth. It also shows up here in the corner what level it is. So if you're really bad at math, you can just look at the dots. And so plus, once you start getting a bunch of those, I could replace my level 3 with a 9, replace my level 2 with a 4. Anytime there's a building like a purple that could potentially still be built on, you're probably going to leave it there. At the very end of the game, once you're not going to do any more rolling, if you want to replace that with the number 1, you can. And so, at the end of the game, take any of these existing tiles you have, plus they make a nice pretty skyline and they look cool. And add those. Again, I'm going to throw away any unfinished buildings. I add up my score, and whoever has the most points is the winner. So that's Skyline. Quick, simple game. Plays up to 4 players. It does have a solitaire mode. Basically, you're just rolling to see how many points you can get, and it's got a different gauge of, if you reach different levels, how good you are. everyone that I've seen play this game really likes it. It's a really fun game, great artwork. It's just, people love dice. This is a game you can bring out with anyone, and I really like it a lot. So hopefully that gave you a little bit better idea, and hope that made a little bit more sense. If you have any questions, yeah, you're on your own.